He failed for 7 years straight. His children went hungry. His neighbors called him a fool. His wife cried herself to sleep. And at the end of those 7 years, he became the most talked about man in the entire county. This is the story of what happens when you refuse to stop believing. His name was Eli, a poor farmer in a small, forgotten town in rural America, the kind of town that doesn't appear on most maps. He owned 3 things: a small piece of dry land, a worn-out shovel, and a belief so deep it made people uncomfortable. Every morning before the sun rose, Eli was already in his field, planting. Not because the conditions were right. They were never right. Not because anyone believed in him. Nobody did. He planted because he believed that the ground was listening. His neighbor, Frank, watched him from across the fence every morning. And every morning, Frank shook his head. "Eli, I have farmed this county my whole life. That soil has never produced anything. What makes you think you are any different?" Eli looked at him, then looked back at the ground and kept planting. He had no answer, because faith does not need one. Year 1, nothing grew. Year 2, Noah got sick from poor nutrition. Ruth sold her grandmother's gold bracelet to cover the bills. That night, she sat across from Eli at the kitchen table and said, "How long?" Eli reached across the table, held her hand, and said, "1 more season." He said that for 5 more years. Year 4, the drought came. He planted. Year 5, the floods came. He planted. Year 6, his daughter, Sarah, left for the city. She kissed him at the front door and whispered, "Dad, please stop." He watched her drive away, then turned back to the field and planted. Some nights he sat alone in the dark and talked to the ground. "I know you are tired. I am tired too, but I am not leaving. I am never leaving." Year 7, the worst year. 3 months of no rain. The field so dry it cracked like the floor of a desert. Ruth stopped coming outside to watch. Noah stopped asking when things would get better. Even Frank stopped watching. There was nothing left to watch. Just a stubborn man talking to dead ground. One evening, Noah walked out to the field. He stood there watching for a long time, then said, "Dad, why don't you give up? Everyone else has." Eli stopped, stood up slowly, looked at his son, and said, "Because the ground has not, and neither have I." The boy stood there a long time after that, looking at his father, and something changed in him forever. 3 weeks later, Ruth was in the kitchen making the last of what they had when she heard Noah screaming from outside. She ran out. There in the field, pushing up through the cracked, impossible earth, were hundreds of green shoots. Hundreds, all at once, as if the ground had been saving them, waiting for the man who would never leave. Eli was already on his knees, both hands pressed flat on the earth, head bowed, shoulders shaking. He was not crying from relief. He was crying because he had always known. He had always known, and knowing alone had cost him everything. The harvest that came 8 months later was unlike anything that county had ever seen. People drove from 3 towns over just to look at it. Frank stood at the fence for a long time, then walked over, extended his hand, and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Sarah drove back from the city. Ruth wore a new bracelet, and Noah never forgot what he saw in that field.
Years later, when Noah was grown, with children of his own, he took them back to that same piece of land, still green, still thriving, and he told them the story of the man who talked to dead ground and the ground that listened.
Eli never became famous. Nobody wrote books about him. Nobody made movies about his life. But in that small, forgotten town, every child grew up knowing his name and knowing what it meant. Plant anyway, even when nothing grows. Plant anyway, even when they laugh. Plant anyway, even when you are tired. Because somewhere beneath everything you cannot see, something is growing. The season is coming. Don't stop planting.